Ever just scrolling online and you see like some big celebrity going on about simple living, all that, and then bam, it's a pic from their private jet.
Oh, totally.
Like, come on, does anyone actually buy this?
Right.
It tend to makes you think twice about anything they say,
Yeah. You wonder how they can even say that stuff with a straight face.
Exactly. And that gap between what someone says and how they actually live, that's what we're diving into today.
It's a classic conundrum.
Because we're tackling this question that's been around forever. Is there really a difference between what socialist leaders preach and how they actually live?
It's a big one. And to be clear, we're not just trying to call anyone out here. It's about something bigger. How do we know if leaders are really being genuine, especially when we're talking about something as complex as socialism?
That's it. And the leader we're focusing on today is Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, the president of Brazil.
Interesting choice.
Now, I know you're thinking, Brazil, what's that got to do with us? But trust me, the themes we're unpacking here, they matter everywhere.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
So to get us started, can you give us some background on Lula? He's a pretty major figure in socialist circles, right?
Oh, absolutely. Lula's story is incredible. He came from nothing, literally poverty, worked as a shoe shine boy, then in a factory as a metal worker. And that's what got him involved in unions, which launched his whole political career.
Wow, talk about a self-made man.
Totally. And he's always held on to that image of a man, of the people fighting for the working class. He's all about reducing inequality, and he's put in place policies to tackle poverty, things like social programs, better access to education, all that.
So he's walking the walk, at least when it comes to policy.
Yeah.
But then there's this whole other side to the story.
Yeah, and this is where things get a little sticky, because those socialist ideals, they kind of clash with his personal choices he's made that have even some of his supporters scratching their heads.
Like what?
Okay, so Lula has this well-known thing for luxury watches. I'm talking Patek Philippe, the kind of brand that screams, I'm doing all right. One watch in particular he wears is estimated to be worth more than 10 years of the minimum wage in Brazil.
Whoa, hold up. We're not talking about a cheap Timex here. That's a statement piece. And it makes you think, how could you be so into equality while rocking something that screams inequality?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's not just the watch. It all feeds into this narrative that's been building around Lula for ages, these accusations of hypocrisy, enjoying the high life, while criticizing the system that allows for that kind of wealth.
I've seen those articles. There's that thing about him staying in super fancy hotels too, right?
Exactly. It clashes with this image he's cultivated of being in touch with the struggles of everyday Brazilians.
And it's not just about appearances. It's about trust.
100%. When there's even a hint of a gap between your words and your actions, especially when you're in a position of power like Lula, well, people start to lose faith. They question your motives if you really believe what you're preaching.
Yeah, it's that classic question, are you in it for the people or are you in it for yourself?
Exactly. And this isn't new. This critique of socialist leaders maybe enjoying the perks of the very system they're trying to change, it's a tale as old as time. It gets at this fundamental tension between pushing for change and dealing with the realities of power and privilege.
So how do we make sense of this disconnect then? Is it just human nature or is there something more to it?
Well, now that's where things get really interesting.
So we're back digging deeper into this idea. Can you really live a life of luxury while fighting for equality? We're using Lula's time as president in Brazil as our example. But like you said, these questions, they go way beyond one leader or one political party even.
Yeah, it's like this underlying tension you see across the political spectrum.
Yeah.
How do you match up what you do personally with what you're saying publicly, especially when you're talking about stuff like social justice and everyone having the same economic opportunities?
It's like that whole thing you hear sometimes, champagne socialists.
Yeah.
Criticizing the system while sipping champagne.
Mm.
We're really saying it's that simple, though?
I mean, it's rarely that cut and dry, right? I think that's where things get a bit lost sometimes. Because, yeah, at first glance, it's kind of jarring seeing a leader who's all about helping the poor while wearing a watch that costs more than most people make in a year.
I can see that.
But we've got to remember these leaders, they're human too. They have their own pasts, their own desires, heck, even their own flaws.
So where do we draw that line then? When does a little indulgence become full-blown hypocrisy, especially for someone like Lula?
That is the million-dollar question.
Oh.
And honestly, there's no easy answer. No magic formula to tell us exactly when someone's crossed the line. It's about stepping back and looking at the bigger picture, everything they're doing, their policies, how committed they seem to the cause they're always talking about.
So not just about a watch or a fancy hotel stay. It's about if those choices fit with the overall impact they're having.
Exactly. If a leader's actually making life better for the people they represent, if they're giving a voice to the voiceless, fighting for real change, then maybe we should be looking at those personal choices a little differently.
It's like judging the whole meal, not just one bite. Because let's be honest, expecting our leaders to be perfect, to live some totally minimalist life that's just not realistic.
Right. And it's a standard we don't even hold ourselves to. I mean, come on, we all enjoy a little something something every now and then, even if we know that money could go to a good cause.
Okay, you got me there. So it's all about finding that balance, huh?
Mhm.
Realizing we're all just trying to figure things out with our own set of values and, yeah, sometimes even contradictions.
Exactly. And for leaders, well, they're doing all that figuring out under a microscope. But you touched on something interesting before, this idea that socialism might be easier in smaller countries that are more similar.
Less diverse.
Yeah. And that gets at another layer of complexity here. Context is key. What might seem like a lavish lifestyle in one place might be pretty average somewhere else.
It's all relative, I guess. Like
Yes.
owning a car in a big city, that's almost a luxury. But in the country, it's a necessity.
Exactly. And all those cultural differences, economic realities, even geography, they all factor into how we see wealth inequality and what it even means to live a socialist life.
So even though it's easy to jump to conclusions about a leader's choices, we got to factor in the bigger picture. Where are they? What's going on around them?
Absolutely. And we have to check ourselves too, our own biases, what we think is authentic or ethical, because those ideas can really warp how we see things and stop us from having these conversations with an open mind.
Which brings up a really important question. If it's not always clear-cut, how do we as voters, as citizens, figure out if a leader is actually living by their word?
That is the question, and it's one we'll dive into head first right after this.
So we're back and ready to tackle that question.
Mm.
How do we measure up a leader's lifestyle with their message? Especially when we're talking about big ideas like equality and social justice.
Well, that's a question that's been debated for ages, hasn't it? Probably always will be.
Because let's be real here. Nobody's perfect. We all have those moments where we don't quite live up to our own ideals, right?
Oh, absolutely. But I do think there's a difference between those little slip-ups we all have and a pattern of behavior that tells us the leader's words and their actions just don't line up.
Okay, so give me an example. What would that kind of pattern look like? What should set off alarm bells?
Well, let's say someone's always talking about sustainable living, right?
Yeah.
But they still order takeout sometimes. We've all been there.
Totally guilty of that.
But it's a whole different story if that same person is out there fighting against environmental laws or investing tons of money in companies that pollute.
So it's not just about a few choices here and there. It's about the whole system, the choices support.
Exactly. It's about connecting the dots. Seeing if their personal choices, their policies, the overall impact they have, all actually line up with the stuff they say they care about.
So it's not enough to just talk the talk. They have to walk the walk in a way that actually changes things for the better.
Exactly. And that means we've got to be willing to think critically, to look beyond the surface and ask those tough questions about power privilege. Who's really benefiting?
Because at the end of the day, we deserve leaders who we can trust, not ones who make us raise an eyebrow, right? Leaders who are actually in it for everyone, not just themselves.
Couldn't agree more. And that goes for any ideology, whether we're talking about socialism, capitalism, whatever. True leadership isn't about personal gain or looking good. It's about service, putting others first, and being dedicated to something bigger than yourself.
So as we wrap up today's deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with this challenge. Next time you see that gap between a leader's words and their actions, don't just scroll on by. Don't just accept it.
Right. Dig a little deeper. Ask yourself those tough questions and demand better. Because if we want a world that's more just and equal, it starts with us being informed and engaged citizens, not just sitting on the sidelines.
And on that note, we'll leave you all to ponder those challenges. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking those questions, and keep diving deeper into the complexities of our world.
See you next time.
Happy diving.